My name is Nick Moore. I'm part of the education staff here at the Louisiana Art and Science Museum. Today, we'd like to show you some features of the Ancient Egypt Gallery that you may not have noticed before. To do this, I'd like to introduce you to Natalie Roy. Natalie teaches Roman technology, myth makers, and Latin at Glasgow Middle School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She's a National Board Certified Teacher and was the 2021 Louisiana State Teacher of the Year. For the last 3 decades, she's been bringing her students to visit the Ancient Egypt Gallery here at the LASM, which she says is one of her favorite Louisiana museums. And frankly, we agree with her. Natalie?
Welcome to the Ancient Egypt Gallery. Today, you'll be seeing a real mummy. Before you do, let's take a look around. I'm standing in front of a pyramid. Pyramids were large stone structures built as tombs or graves for kings, called pharaohs in ancient Egypt. You probably already know that ancient means a long, long time ago. This gallery contains objects from ancient Egypt around 5,000 years ago, but also from Roman Egypt. The Roman Empire controlled Egypt for almost 600 years, so let's look at some of those objects. In this case, you'll see the blade of a Roman sword, or gladius. That's the word for sword in Latin, which is the language the Romans spoke. It's where we get the word gladiator. Gladiators were enslaved people who fought in large arenas all over the Roman world. In this case, you'll see a cartonnage, or mummy mask, made of linen material, or sometimes reused papyrus paper and plaster, similar to paper mache. It was painted with beautiful colors like blue and gold. It was placed over the mummy's face as part of the burial. Look at the side of the mask. Can you see the layers of material used to make the cartonnage? This cartonnage was made for a female mummy. In this case, you'll see 3 different styles of death masks, all made for men. You can probably tell that they come from different time periods. One is a mask created by Roman people. Which one do you think it is? What do you see that makes you say that? The Romans and Greeks both controlled Egypt at some point in history. They loved Egyptian culture. They even worshiped some Egyptian gods, like Isis. They also liked to bury their dead in similar ways. At 4,132 miles long, the Nile River is the longest river in the world, and it flows right through the middle of Egypt. The ancient Egyptians used the river to grow crops, travel, and transport stone for their pyramids. To build their pyramids, they used large barges to float granite and limestone down the river from Aswan, where the stone quarries were located. That's just north of Denver on the map. It was a long way. The Nile was, and still is today, a major part of life in Egypt. Religion was an important part of Egyptian life. The Egyptians sometimes represented gods as animals in their art. They made up stories called myths to explain things. In one of the most famous stories from Egyptian mythology, Osiris married Isis. Their brother Set was jealous and killed Osiris, but then Isis brought Osiris back to life. That's why she was known as the goddess of resurrection or new life. Osiris came to be known as the god of the underworld or death. Assisting him was the god Anubis, who supposedly invented the process of mummification. He was often depicted in art with a jackal head. You'll see him later in the exhibit when we talk about mummification. Before you walk into the mummy area, let's talk a little about how to do that. Even though our mummy has been dead for a long time, we should show him some respect by walking quietly into his space. The passageway is supposed to be like entering an ancient pyramid tomb where the Egyptians buried their kings. Our mummy probably wasn't a king, but we can still have an authentic pyramid experience. Let's take a look. Looking at the mummy can be a little strange, but remember, he can't hurt you at all. His hair, teeth, and skin are dried out by a process called mummification. In this process, the moisture which decays a human body was removed so that the body would be preserved. If you need to take a break from looking at the mummy, you can just sit on the stone bench near the glass case. The ancient Egyptians carved entire rooms out of stone underneath the pyramids. They sometimes created complicated passageways to trick robbers who might want to steal the things they buried with their king. The pharaoh or king was buried with everything they thought that he or she might need in the afterlife, like food, jewelry, even a boat or animals. These animals were mummified also. Many mummified cats and birds have been found in tombs. Let's look at some of the objects near the mummy's tomb. The large jar is called an amphora. This was a clay storage container used by ancient Mediterranean people to ship and store liquids, or sometimes grains. Look closely at the beautiful gold color of the mask. Since gold is expensive, in the tomb it would have been used to show wealth. So I bet you're wondering what the mummy actually looked like. Well, with the help of some special scientists from Louisiana State University, we were able to peek into the past and find out. Here's Dr. Teresa Wilson to tell you more about their exciting discoveries.
I'm Dr. Wilson. I am the Assistant Director of the LSU Faces Lab. I am also a research professor at LSU. Typically, a forensic anthropologist will use the pelvis to determine somebody's age. However, because the mummy is still wrapped up, we are not able to actually look at those. In order to determine how old our mummy is, we need to look at the teeth, specifically the wisdom tooth. In our mummy, we do know that the wisdom tooth has completed growth, and that means that our mummy is at least 18 years old. In addition to the teeth, we can also look at the collarbone. The collarbone will actually stop growing at 22 years old. So we know, based on the x-rays, that our mummy is at least 22 years old. We also know that our mummy isn't very old and is probably no more than 35 years old because we do not have any arthritis in his bones. At the Faces Lab, we are able to put a face back onto a skull. How we do this is we take tissue depth markers and we place them onto the skull, and we use clay to fill in the gaps between the skull. Once we figure out how deep the tissue should be on different parts of the skull, then an artist will come back through and actually put the face back on. Now that we brought the mummy back to life, let's see how he was prepared for the afterlife.
Egyptian mummification is a drying out process that was performed by skilled priests called embalmers. It usually took about 70 days, or a little more than 2 months. First, organs like the brain, lungs, and intestines were removed and placed in canopic jars. These jars would be sealed and buried with the body. After the liquid was removed from the body, the embalmers filled the body with natron, a type of salt used to dry things out. After the process of drying was complete, the body was wrapped with linen strips. Prayers were said during the wrapping, and amulets were placed to ward off evil. When the process was complete, the body would be placed in the tomb and covered with a cartonnage. There was one single organ that was not removed from the body during mummification, and that was the heart. The Egyptians believed that the heart was needed to account for wrongdoings, and that Anubis would weigh the heart of the person on a scale. So the heart would be placed on one side of the scale, and the feather of truth would be weighed against it. If the person had lived a life of goodness, they believed his or her heart would be lighter than the feather. Do you see Anubis weighing someone's heart in the artwork on the wall? As you explore the gallery today, what do you see, think, and wonder about ancient Egypt? How were their lives similar, and how are they different from our lives today? What can you discover on your journey through the Ancient Egypt Gallery?